Depending on where in the world you are. Thank you so much for joining our Agency Acceleration live stream with David Baker. Super excited to have David on with us. About half of you, I think, are probably coming over from the lesson that David just conducted. Thank you for attending that. This is going to be a different feel. We get to ask David a bunch of questions here on a bunch of live streaming and social networks services. So we got a bunch of people who also haven't been, who didn't get a chance to see that. If you didn't get a chance to see David's lesson and you want to see David's lesson and 13 other industry experts, marketing gurus, if you will, and agency-focused marketing gurus at that. 2 weeks ago, we had Neil Patel as an example. I'll give you a list of everybody who's involved in our series. I want to take this moment to encourage you to register. You can register at sharpspring.com/acceleration, I believe. We'll get to that. We'll get you that link in just a second. But first, I want to introduce David. You can see David on screen here. David is there he is. How about this? Let me introduce myself first, right? For those of you who don't know me. I'm Rick Carlson. I'm the founder and CEO of SharpSpring. SharpSpring is a marketing automation company that has built its entire business. We built our entire business around digital marketing agencies, and today we work with about 2,000 digital agencies around the world. We are incredibly thankful for the success that we've had in the last 5 or 6 years. It's been great, and to be able to do stuff like this is just humbling. So nice to meet you all out there. Thank you again for joining us. Let me introduce you now to David. If you're not familiar with David, he is well, you know what? I think the New York Times said it best about his last book. He's an author. He's written 5 books. The last book was The Business of Expertise, how entrepreneurial experts convert insights into impact and wealth. But what the New York Times said about David is pretty darn high praise. He is the expert's expert. And I think that's absolutely true. If you just saw the lesson, he gives you, I think, fantastic tools on how to do the things that we all, I think, know on one level or another that we should be doing. And so, very, very practical advice. I learned a lot from the lesson, and especially love the bravery concept that you touched on. So for those that, I'm going to jump right into it. Let's get you talking. I'll start with the first question, and the first question is really for those who didn't get the benefit of going to your lesson just now. I should say that if you haven't done that, we're going to have recordings of David's lesson and all the other experts. So register and you'll have access to those. But for now, hey, first, good afternoon, David. How you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you again, Rick.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this with us. All right, so you're an expert on positioning. For those tuning in to the live stream who didn't get to see the lesson that you just provided us, what does positioning for an agency really mean?
Positioning for an agency is really about carving out a tight positioning so that just a few people, prospective clients, are drawn to you because what you're solving is what's keeping them up at night. And what you're solving for them is not the same thing that's keeping other, say, CMOs up at night. It's almost this process of irrelevancy, which is completely opposite of the way most people think of it. Most people think of positioning as developing or enhancing even more relevancy so that they have more opportunity. They're gathering as much opportunity as they can, but that's the opposite way to think about it. A more courageous versus a kind of a desperate approach is to say, all right, we are going to become irrelevant to most of the prospects And in the process, we're going to become deeply relevant to just a few. And we can talk later during our time together today about how we narrow that down. And I talked about it in the talk that most of you just heard. But that's really the essence of it, is how to become relevant to a few prospects.
And that's where the bravery comes in, right?
Right.
Where when it's especially in times like these where it's absolutely uncomfortable to eliminate. I mean, that hand motion sort of said it all. To eliminate all these other opportunities, just very uncomfortable. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and we aren't even going to feel the implications of the bad decisions we're making now until life gets a little bit closer back to the previous normal. And we're going to discover that now we're stuck with some clients that we took out of desperation, and they're really not the kind of clients that we can build our future firm on. So it's a combination of confidence and smarts, putting all of that together. And this is the oddest thing about this, is that the 2,000 firms that are agencies that are working on the SharpSpring platform right now, what they do for a living is to help their clients with positioning and then to spread that positioning. But when it comes to doing it for themselves, it's so much more difficult. They're, as I talked about, they're kind of sitting inside their own bottle and they can't read the label on the outside, or even if they can, they're terrified. They're struggling at night. They're thinking, oh, do I have enough opportunity? Do I have enough opportunity coming? And the notion of real positioning, where you're saying, no, I'm not going to take that new opportunity, is absolutely terrifying, because their instinct says, I've got to grab everything that I can, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. Two things for the audience that's out there. The one that did, the group that hadn't listened to the lesson, I loved your metaphor of being, and you just touched on it, but I want to say it slower. Being stuck inside your own jar makes it a much harder task to position yourself, because
Right.
you're sort of polluted by your own, your own views of of your company and your agency and so forth. So it's very difficult to step out and look from the outside and create your positioning from that vantage point. And so what a fantastic metaphor that you use there.
Yeah, a new business idea for SharpSpring would be to create a match.com for all of your agency clients. He's writing this down.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Where you pair each other up and you help the other person come up with the positioning, because it's so much. That's why surgeons don't operate on themselves, right? Because it's just too painful to draw the knife on yourself. So that'd be a business opportunity. I'm kind of kidding, but it's just easier to do it for somebody else. Like if you look at your own positioning, you would never let a client get away with that lack of definition and courage and singular focus in most cases.
Yeah, that's, hey, it may or may not be a business idea, but we're always about building communities. And what a cool idea for a workshop or some sort of connection between our agency partners and agencies that aren't our partners, to be clear, where they can help one another position themselves. Obviously, they'd have to be in non-competitive.
Right.
It would sort of be fun poisoning somebody's.
Yeah, right.
I'm kidding. So, all right, fantastic. Good. So, look, many agencies, they don't really want to narrow their target market, because they just, and we're touching on this, but they just can't get over the idea that to narrow it brings them fewer potential customers, especially at a time, like the one that we're living in, where new prospects are fewer and farther between. So, how do you respond to that?
Well, let me respond with sort of a personal anecdote and step outside of the agency world that we're trying to address here and just think about you and your personal life. So let's fast forward. For some of us, we don't have to fast forward all that far, and say we're kind of looking back on our life and reminiscing and saying, how effective was I as a person? And some of us are going to say, darn, I wish I had accomplished more. I wish I had done more. Now, for those people who say that, who look back over their life and say they wish they'd accomplished more, will that come from simply not having enough opportunity, or not narrowing down what they focused on and really being good at something. So bouncing around, chasing all kinds of opportunities, or just taking the courage and the time to be really good at something. And the answer is obvious there. In the developed world, which is where most of your clients are listening from, opportunity is pretty much everywhere. It's a matter of choosing between that. And we come to this perspective from a business standpoint, almost like we come to it from a personal standpoint. And we feel like we are, it's almost like going through a Great Depression where I have to keep holding on to my pennies. It's a perspective of not abundance, but more just caution and fear. And that's really not, I would rather you just flame out as a business and make all kinds of courageous choices than to take the safe route and keep taking clients that are not a good fit. What we're trying to do in solving this positioning is not to stay busy, because most of you are busy. It's really about being choosier and having clients where two things happen. And these two things are really important, but we only usually talk about one. The first thing that's really important is that you make more money. And the second thing is that you do better work for clients. And in this discussion about positioning, sometimes we don't even really properly think about what is our commitment to our clients. And if you're a generalist and you're just doing your best work and throwing the best people at it without a lot of deep expertise that comes from pattern matching and experience, then your clients are getting cheated too. So I'm trying to be the voice that not just argues for you making more money, but doing better work for clients too.
Yeah, as you were talking, I realized really what you're talking about and stressing is that there's huge opportunity costs here to taking work that really isn't what you're good at or what you want to be doing, that to feed yourself. I mean, which is a real practical need, right? But there is an opportunity cost to that. And if you're constantly doing that kind of thing, you can't ever become something else, something greater, doing higher. Is that, am I putting words in your mouth, or is that sort of a better way of saying what you're saying?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And let's take this out of the discussion of positioning for a minute and just think about the relative quality of your client base. Here's how I would sort of look at that as an outsider. Have they used a firm like yours before? You don't want to be training them on that. Do you have direct access to the decision maker? You can't be working through a gatekeeper all the time. Are they spending somebody else's money, whoever this decision maker is? In other words, it's a budget that's allocated and they have authority over it. So you think about that and you say, now that I stop and consider each of my clients, about half of them are really great and the other half are kind of marginal. How do I fix that? Well, the best way to fix that is to have a stronger lead generation plan. And here's the terror, because I don't know how to create a strong lead generation plan for a firm that isn't tightly positioned, because I don't know what to talk about. I don't know who to send that insight to. I don't know what keeps them up at night. It's just, but if I'm working with a firm that is really well positioned, all of a sudden it's fun to do a lead generation plan because I know where they are, what they're struggling with, what to say to them. And all of those three things are different from how a different agency might answer that question.
Makes a ton of sense. The confidence level of what you're doing when you're working in your comfort zone, because you have positioned yourself well and you've got the clients that you want. It's it sounds, as you describe it, like it just sort of all comes together.
Right.
So, and who doesn't want that? Okay, great. Here's a really sort of practical question for you. You've said that agencies have a good chance to understand whether their positioning will work before they can actually adopt it, So tell us how that's possible. Tell us how do you test, how do you ensure that your positioning is on track, before you really adopt it?
There are a bunch of answers to that. The most reliable scientific ones come about around specific numbers. So one simple way is to say, if I forget about the ethics of buying a list and all that, I'm not talking about that. Don't let that cloud your thinking here as I'm talking. But if you decided you wanted to buy a list of your prospects and you wanted to get a complete list of all of your prospects, and that list included everybody, but it was less than 10,000 people, then that would be a pretty valid test of a positioning. But if that exercise of buying a list you came up with 200,000 prospects, then you've got a lot more work to do because that's not narrow enough. Another way to look at that, and this is also scientific and mathematical, is to flip that to the other side of things and say, all right, how many competitors do I have for this declared positioning? When I look at answering that question by reading the statements that are on your websites right now, I think, that's pretty much interchangeable. It's like almost any firm could take that, copy, paste it, and put it on their website. That means that there's a lot of potential competitors. But if your statement, your positioning statement is such that you can find at least 10, but no more than 200 of those competitors, then that puts you in that sweet spot. If there are more than 200 competitors to your stated positioning, then you're going to typically be too interchangeable in the prospect's mind, and you're not going to be able to command any pricing premium. If there are fewer than 10, then the chances are that you're not relevant enough, and you're probably going to run out of opportunity. So you're not going to find enough clients. Statistically, in a professional service market, which is what your clients are, SharpSpring clients are in the professional service space. They just happen to be under the marketing professional services space. You would assume that you can't lock up more than 1 to 1.5% of a particular market. So if you've got at least 2,000 customers and you've got 1% of those, that gives you 20 clients, and that's the right number. When we're trying to answer this question about the viability positioning, we're not too worried about not having few clients. We want to be worried about not having enough qualified clients. And that's a critical distinction. So we use math. So 10 to 200 competitors, 2,000 to 10,000 prospects. That's the best place to start to answer that question.
Yeah, I was just going to summarize, but you did a real nice job there at the end. You're really looking at two things: the size of the market opportunity, what we call the TAM, the total addressable market. Mm-hmm. You don't want it to be too small.
Right.
You don't want it to be too big because you're not, either, right?
Right.
And similarly, there's a reason if you don't bump into any competitors, there may be a reason for that.
Yeah, you get excited at first, right? But then you realize, oh shoot, they all thought of that and then dropped it.
And they left. They're either they tried it and died, right?
Right.
And for obvious reasons, you don't want too many competitors either. So it's sort of two ways to look at something to test. I just I can't help but say how relevant all this stuff is, not just to an agency like what we're here talking about today, to SharpSpring itself, right? We focused on this vertical of just working and building our business around agencies based on just about everything that you're talking about. And I could talk about that for 20 minutes, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to ask you, I think I'll probably just, given the time, I'm going to ask you one more question before we get to some audience live questions as well. Okay.
Sure.
So last question, what one piece of advice do you have for agencies that will help them accelerate over this is the agency acceleration series. If you had to give one piece, and we'll take 2 or 3, just to be clear. But the question is, if you had one piece of advice to give to help an agency accelerate over the next 90 days, what would it be?
That one's pretty easy for me to answer. It's not going to be a satisfying answer to some folks, but this, and I probably need to think of a less crude example, but this is the time in history when the weakest kids get thrown off the merry-go-round. And what's going to be left, that will be 70 to 80% of the existing firms. Those are the firms that will be left, and they are innately stronger. And the ones that stand out from that pack are the ones who are not just trying to exist right now, but they are actually investing in their own marketing automation platform. They are investing in black box sort of research. They're making a critical hire when everybody else is laying off. They are investing for the future. I don't know when it will happen, but I am certain that this industry, as an industry, will come roaring back and it will be stronger than it ever has been. But there will, behind all that, left in the trail will be a lot of firms that have failed. And those will be the ones who quit innovating, quit investing, and made really foolish decisions that weren't very brave. Now, some principals can be too brave, right? So you need to balance that out with the people who love you and will speak to you without fear. But that's exactly what I would say. I'm thinking, all right, I don't want to just exist. That's sort of what happened in March and April and maybe early May. From there, it's like, I'm done just existing. I want to use this. I want to use this to my advantage.
Hey, listen, I think you started off saying that might not be a satisfying answer. Hey, that was real, and that's an extremely satisfying answer from my perspective. It's time to be smart, but it's time to be bold, right? and not be intimidated. We're in this situation, and it's time to gosh, I wish I knew the movie, but it's you either get busy living or get busy dying, right?
Right.
And I think is that Shawshank Redemption? Somebody got to tell me in the chat. I don't know, but I love the quote, and that's what came to mind when you were giving us that advice. Fantastic advice. Thank you so much for that. All right, let us talk, if we can, about our guest, our next guest. As you can tell, David has knocked it out of the park. If you didn't see Neil a couple of weeks ago, we had a fantastic discussion. These are turning out to be hugely high quality, informative get-togethers from the very best of the best thought leaders in our space. So please consider signing up if you're on the live stream and you've not seen these lessons, because they're pretty fantastic. There's the link on the site, sharpspring.com/acceleration. And 2 weeks from now, we're going to have Tom Martin on. Tom is internationally recognized. He's a contributor to Ad Age's Small Agency Diary, and he spent 25 years helping agencies really turn conversations into customers. He's written the book, The Invisible Sale. If you haven't read The Invisible Sale, add it to your list. It's a fantastic book, and we're really, really lucky to have Tom talking with us next week. So join us 2 weeks from now. After Tom, we've got, I don't know that this is the right order, but we got Shama Hyder, we got Drew McClellan, we have Rand Fishkin, and countless others on this series that we're doing over the next couple of months. So sign up, tell your friends, tell your family, tell people you only marginally like to join this series, because there's a lot of good stuff going on here. Okay, that's my pitch for the Agency Acceleration series. Thanks for listening. All right, our next question actually comes from Tom. Again, we're talking to Tom next week. He has a question for you. What are the pros and cons of specialists versus generalist positioning for agencies these days?
What are the pros and cons of a specialist versus a generalist positioning for agencies these days? Well, let me talk about something that might be a little bit unexpected, in the sense that a lot of folks that are using your platform they're not as much the massive holding company agencies. They're people like me. They're working hard, doing great work. They're 5 to 50 people, whatever those number of people, those size firms. And sometimes it's easy to, when you think about making a strong positioning decision, you sort of worship this other firm out here that's pretty big and well-known and famous. And you look at their positioning and it doesn't seem all that specific. It seems to violate a lot of those principles, and it doesn't. And so you say, well, if they can be that good and that big and that well-known and presumably making that much money, why do I have to go the positioning route if they haven't done that? And what's not quite so obvious is that that big firm is actually positioned very tightly, and it's positioned as a big enough firm to be trusted with large enterprise work.
Right.
Now, if you're a smaller firm, that size makes you nimble and fun to work with, but it also it's there's a drawback to the prospective client, and they think, I'd like to work with that firm, but can I trust them with this? What answers that trust question is the specialization. So there's an inverse relationship between the size of the firm, big or small, and how important that specialization is first. So don't get misled by the pros and cons of specialization if you're just looking at the big famous firms thinking that you want to be like them and they haven't made the mistake of tight, narrow positioning. That's probably how I'd answer that one.
Yeah, I can't help it. I have to give you something from my own experience because almost everything you say resonates directly with me. So we started our business and we launched in 2014. It was literally 10 years after the people that we find ourselves competing with launched their businesses. Mm-hmm. And we were that small business and we had to sort of figure out how not to compete with them. In fact, back in 2014, some of our longtime partners know our product wasn't very good. It didn't have the same features as the competitors because it was our MVP. The platform wasn't even stable. You know, I don't want to even talk too much about those times anymore. But we realized there was an opportunity with digital agencies. And so building that decision to position ourselves that way and really build our business that way made us into a successful business today. And it's exactly right. We could have looked and said, hey, how do we be like those guys? But your point is, the positioning is the key. Position narrowly and take all the benefits of that focus. So awesome stuff. All right. So Tony asks, and I'm only going to use first names here. They know the question they asked. So Tony asked, what are the essential elements of a good positioning statement?
Yes. So there's two main elements. It's what you do and who you do it for. So we do this for this. Those are the two primary elements. So let me describe some other things that should be true of your statement to help you. There's no magic here, but I usually want it to be 12 words or less, very succinct. I want to eliminate as many adverbs and adjectives as possible because you don't need to overpromise in a positioning statement. A positioning statement should be perfectly descriptive and boring. You don't need to inspire people with your positioning statement. There are other things that you can use to inspire them. So under 12 words, eliminate adverbs and adjectives wherever possible, and say very specifically two things. We do this for this, and that can be either vertical or horizontal, and I talked about that in that presentation deck. I guess people can go back and watch that deck again, right?
They absolutely can. They register. You threw me a softball there, not unintentionally, but you sure did. Yeah, so again, register, and you can watch David's and all the other experts that we've lined up at sharpspring.com/acceleration, and you'll be able to see that. And yes, that was great, the vertical and horizontal positioning, and that framework for sort of deciding how you might want to position yourself. I have a sort of a very specific question next from Beach Marketing, and that question, maybe you can answer it more broadly, but the specific question is, with a niche in manufacturing, should we focus only on the places where they hang out? I think it's like, hey, it's a very tactical, like, how do we find these guys once we've decided on our positioning and our niche, I think. So you can either answer it however you like, specifically or more generally.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the answer is you should do that. Otherwise, you're just wasting impressions. So that's a vertical positioning. It focuses on a particular SIC or NAICS code, and the there are multiple advantages to a vertical positioning, and one of the key ones is that they hang out at identifiable places. I just call those water coolers. So it might be the conferences when those start up again, the blogs that they might read, might be a trade association that you could publish an article for. So yes, as much as possible, absolutely do that.
Yeah, and not only, where they're hanging out, but you can be proactive. I mean, we're doing it right now, right? We work with agencies. We've proactively created something to bring agencies to us in a shameless way. So, hey, I got another question that's spawning off of this question. So I'm going off the cuff here, but the question is, with a niche or niche in marketing and manufacturing, should blah blah blah. Is that really positioning? Is positioning yourself as a manufacturing oriented agency? Is that tight enough? Is that going far enough? Would you say that firm is successful in position? I recognize it's just a question, by the way.
Sure. Let me illustrate this. I'm gonna draw something for you. So if we're looking at this little spectrum here, and we have the number of competitors is 10 to 200, and then the number of prospects is normally 2,000 to 10,000. Okay, that's the way they should line up. These two should line up here. Now, with manufacturers, they don't actually line up because there are about 10 to 200 manufacturers. So this works. But when you look at the number of manufacturers that might use them, it's way over here. Why is that the case? And what does that mean for this discussion? What it means is that as a group, manufacturers are not sophisticated marketers. And we know that because most of the manufacturers are going to marketing providers who do not specialize in that. So it's not important to that market. That doesn't mean that it's not a good positioning. It can be a very good positioning. It just means that many of your potential clients are not sophisticated enough in this to value your expertise. So you're looking for sort of a subset of that. If we flip back here and we look at another direction, let's say that you don't have enough prospects, but you have the right number of competitors, that's more looking like this over here. That simply is an indication that you are new to the marketplace and the marketplace hasn't quite caught up with you. A lot of competitors are believing that there's hope in this, and so they create a positioning, but there aren't enough qualified prospects yet. The best example of that would be marketing marijuana products or something. It's like there's going to be a market here. Let's specialize in it, but there probably aren't enough. It hasn't shaken out yet quite.
Right. Understood. And great example, by the way. So that diagram is in your lesson. The top line is the competitors. The bottom line is really the size of the market on your diagram.
Right.
And if they don't match up, it's a sign that maybe the positioning isn't quite right for the reasons you just described. So,
right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, fantastic framework. Love it. Good. Maybe we're bumping up at the top of the hour. I'm going to ask one more question. This is from President for Homer. I don't know. We've got an election going on, and apparently Homer's running as well. I'm assuming that's Simpson. What trends in digital marketing agencies are seeing? What trends, I guess, are you seeing with digital marketing agencies in terms of how they differentiate? That's how I'm interpreting this question.
Yeah. Well, we probably almost need a tighter definition of digital because 60% of marketing is digital, so it's almost a meaningless distinction anymore. But I think I understand the question. So there's areas that are just dying away where it's just hard for me to get excited about that anymore. And that would be things like building websites. It's just, there's so many tools where the building of websites can be done cheaper, it can be offshored and so on. And then it's sort of in the middle of that would be, it's holding steady and there's still money to be made. It's not all that exciting, but it's not dying yet. That would be stuff like SEO, PPC, paid digital. And then the stuff that's surfacing that seems to have a lot more staying power would be things like CRO, would be e-commerce for small sites that are competing against Amazon, and this could be a couple of hour discussion. It's hard to narrow these things out, but if that's what the question is about, that's how I'd answer it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know. I think that's again a great answer. So I think that's right. Things like pay-per-click, you're really sort of capped on because you're an expense, generally layered onto a budget in one way or another, depending on your price model. And that almost sort of caps the value that you can provide to somebody. And so you want to find yourself in something that's less commoditized, I think.
Right, exactly.
So, all right. Hey, this has been 10 out of 10 from my perspective. And I'm talking about you, and the quality of your answers has been really great. The lesson was fantastic. The follow-up was super enjoyable from my perspective. And I know I'm speaking for all the folks that are attending as well when I say that. So thank you so much, David. I really
thank you.
Really appreciate this. It's been fantastic. Hey guys, we're not done here. You can get a signed copy of David's book, The Business of Expertise. A signed copy, not just any copy, but a signed copy. If you sign up, if you have an interest, we obviously love to talk to you at SharpSpring. Again, we built our business around agencies, if that's not at all obvious here. And we would love to talk to you. So if you sign up for the series, please do that. And if you sign up for a demo of our platform, you get a signed copy of David's book. So it's a great book. You ought to get one. And, we hope you do that. We also have a survey that we would love for you to fill out. How do we do here? Was this valuable? Should I wear a green shirt? I don't know. That is sharpspring.com/David survey. And so if you'll help us make this better, this is here to provide value for all of you out there. And so if you're inclined, let us know. We'd appreciate it. Very good. I think, are we wrapped up here, producer? Are we wrapped up, Katrina? I think we are. And look, I'll just wrap it up by saying thank you again, David. Thank you for all of you who are on the live stream and for those who attended the lesson. I know time's a premium here, so we very much appreciate you spending time with us this afternoon. Thanks, everyone.